Yo, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to All in Motion. That's right. You made it. We made it. Episode number 35. Love yourself first. Our next guest has done it all. She used to host her own relationship show. And, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ebony Empress. That's right. Let's get it. Hello, welcome to All Motion. We have Scar City here and Miss Ebony Empress. And before we get started with our lovely guest, Scar City, obviously everybody knows him, but if he has a minute, I want to just give a quick introduction, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is Scar City from All Emotion. I am a cybersecurity expert, along with a cryptocurrency expert, as well as a music business consultant. And I'm very happy to be doing this interview.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. And Miss Ebony Empress, hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello and good evening from the UK, the London in specific.
Love it.
So,
love it.
Yeah, great to meet you guys again. Miss Ebony Empress. I can tell you about my name, but I'll tell you what I do. I'm a speaker. I'm a coach. I help people to reveal their hidden gems, whatever they may be, to the world, and and to tell people how they make a difference. I do shows on YouTube, but I also have a website where I do some work around masterclasses, helping people to release their voices and speak powerfully. And I have a book coming out next week, the end of next week, which will be on Amazon, on how to release your voice and speak powerfully. So that's who I am, and that's what I'm up to. Thank you.
And happy, both of us from Scar City, and both of us happy belated birthday. You have something. Your birthday to share with the audience falls on a very interesting day, doesn't it?
It certainly does, but nothing to do with me.
No, but share for a minute. I think it's really cool. I don't think I've ever met anybody.
Valentine's Day. But I appreciate it because it's probably one of those love-hate days. So if you have a friend or you're dating, it's a great time because you get two presents, right? If you're not dating, you get one from anybody or your kids or friends or whatever. It's a one present type thing. But yeah, if there's someone special in your life, then it's two. But also it's a love-hate thing because sometimes people just have bad experiences around Valentine's Day, especially if they're not seeing anybody special, then they can feel quite lonely and isolated. So sometimes a mention of Valentine's Day can bring different vibes from your friends. So yeah, it's a love-hate day, but I love it regardless because it is my birthday. And I'm really happy to be born on that day. I think a love day is the best.
So I know you spoke a little bit about it in the beginning about, I've only known you as Miss Ebony and the Empress. And you shared a little bit. Do you want to just share what that means to you and where that came about?
Yeah, I can do. It's quite a funny story, actually. I met a guy who was a player. It's a serious player.
Like a player? Like a player with women player or like a baseball?
Woman player.
Oh, okay.
And how I got the name. Well, I was working in a bookshop in London and not working there, but doing events on relationships because I used to have a podcast which was all about relationships for 5 years or more. But before the podcast started, I used to do events where people could get together in small groups and talk about relationships, how they're experiencing relationships, and I would give advice to people. So I had this group of women and we used to meet up in a bookshop on a Friday night years ago now. And we would talk about relationships and how we're experiencing them. And I'd give them advice and stuff. And the guy who owned the bookshop invited me on a date because he used to listen into our shows, our conversations, not shows, conversations. And I think he got a little liking for me. I don't know, but he asked me out on this date. And I was working in a day job down not far from the bookshop, and I mentioned to someone at work that I was going on this date, this guy from the bookshop. And he was like, don't go. And I was like, why? He said, he's a player. Like, he will play you and you're a nice person. I don't want to see you get hurt. So let me tell you what he's going to do. He's going to take you out and he's then going to take you for a walk and he will start reciting poetry to you. And I was like, why would he do that? Well, he's going to recite poetry. And the more poetry he recites, the more he'll think he can get whatever it is he wants from you. So he said, don't say no, just go and test it for yourself. But there've been so many women that have fallen victim to this guy. I'm telling you because I like you, you know. And so anyway, I went on the date. When I turned up for the date, this guy who worked in the bookshop and was normally quite dressed down, you know, T-shirts and stuff. This guy, I was on my way home from work. He was better dressed than I was. I was literally like, whoa, where are you going? He was like, his hair, because he had these long dreadlocks and he had them all wrapped up on the top of his head. And then he had this outfit, which was like, it looked like dungarees, but it was like just really like an American look almost, really looked smart. And I didn't even recognize him. I walked right past him and he had to shout at me I was like, oh. I turned around. I was like, okay, hello. I was like, wow, where do you think you're going? Right? I went for the dinner. We went to dinner. We went to a restaurant in Oxford Street in London. And when we were in the restaurant, he said, you know, the people in the restaurant knew him. So clearly he'd taken a lot of women to the same restaurant. And I don't think he even paid for the food because there was some arrangement going on there because I didn't see any money being paid for the meal. Anyway, so we leave and he says, let's go for a walk. And I said, oh, okay. So I said, okay, let's go for a walk. So we're going for the walk. It was a summer's afternoon. We're walking down Oxford Street and he starts reciting poetry. You are this, you are that, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, here goes. This is how it works, right? This is how he gets the women. So I'm listening to the poetry and I'm just smiling in my head and going like, oh, really? Anyway, he goes on. We walk for probably about 45 minutes and non-stop poetry all the way. And I said to him, right, I'm ready to go home. So he said, let's do something spontaneous. I said, what? He said, well, you can come and hang out at my house and we can talk and chill and just relax, you know, and you don't have to go to work tomorrow. You can just chill out with me. You can call in sick. I was like, what? Are you joking me? I don't know you. Who are you? Like, no, I'm sorry. Not for me. I'm going home, actually. Please, let's get to a train station so I can get home. So we're walking towards this train station all the way to the train, right until the door shut. This guy was on it with the poetry. And thank God I've been told, because probably I would have been like, oh, that's so cute. Like women do, right?
You would have felt. You would have felt.
Yeah, I would have been like, yeah, wow. And the way he looked and everything. Do you know what I mean? There's a possibility I might have been a little bit weak at the knees.
So, Miss Ebony, I understand that, you know, you were born in Britain. I want to jump into a little bit of your background and where you grew up. And I understand your ethnicity is Jamaican. So I'm just trying to understand, what was that experience like being born in Britain, but actually having the ethnicity of being Jamaican and the culture, the food and everything. What was that experience like growing up in London?
Well, it was like living two lives. So in school, we were British and we mixed with other British English kids who did not have the same life back home as we did. So going home, you would be treated like a Caribbean child. You get beat, you get disciplined. There's a lot of the food we ate at home was not like the food that we ate with our friends or at school, we'd have our Caribbean dishes, because as soon as Jamaicans could import their food, they did. And so our lives were different, because our English white counterparts peers, or we call them peers, they could have more freedoms, like they were rude to their parents and stuff. You were never rude to your parents unless you wanted to die early. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't do things like that. And we were restricted from going out and stuff and mixing too much with the other children, because they didn't want those children to influence us. As far as they were concerned, we were Caribbean children, although we were born in the UK. So it was an interesting experience. And there were lots of fights growing up with white kids, because, there was just that thing of there was a lot of racism, discrimination locally. I mean, me and my sister spent most of our junior school, what you call, I don't know what you guys would call your first, from about 5 to 11, just fighting every day. And we were fighting because we were the only black family in a white school. And as the only black family, and being 4 girls, because there's only a year between each of us, we weren't taking any prisoners. Basically, it was a fight. We would go in and we would fight. And so my mum and dad never really understood what was going on in that school. And that, because we'd come and make sure our clothes were never messed up or torn, but we would take off what we needed to and we would fight them. And that was a struggle, because I think a lot of our education got messed up because of those experiences of being in a constant battle, really because of the system we were experiencing. Our parents came and they experienced racism in the fact that, if you, when they came here to get a house, you couldn't get a house. You could just about get a bed to stay in when my dad came, the 1950s, because everywhere you'd see signs up: no blacks, no Jews, not Jews, no blacks, no Irish, and no dogs. And so when those signs were up, that meant you're excluded. And it was actually the white Irish who often were able to get accommodation, who helped the blacks that came here to get a bed initially, because a lot of them shared beds. One person would go to work in the night and the other person would go to work in the day, and one would get out of the bed and the other person would get in the bed. And that's how they lived when they first came here. But eventually they slowly grew, their economics got better. And as it did, they started to get together and club together and save money together in what we call a partner system, or susi, I think they call it, or sissy, or whatever it's called, system, but we call it partner in Jamaica, where they save money together. And people started to rent houses and then buy houses slowly. And as one family got a house and the next one got a house, and that's how they managed to get their first homes here, which most of them have kept for probably 50, 60 years or more. So that was the start. And that was my experience here. It wasn't easy.
Right. No, absolutely. That's it's interesting that, that's like basically like a hybrid, you understand what it's like to be in Britain, and then you understand the Jamaican culture and, the music, the food, and the lifestyle that comes with, being a Jamaican, even though you're not physically in Jamaica. So that's pretty interesting to hear. But Jacob, you want to jump into the next question?
You grew up in a really strict family, Christian family. Your father was correct me if I'm wrong, he was a pastor, preacher, correct?
My dad was a preacher. He was an elder in the church.
I'm sorry, a
But
preacher.
he would have they're just a little bit less than pastors, but he was a well-respected person in the church. And so it meant that as a family, we had to hold a high standard.
You ran away from home, which is, I think, cool and very rebellious in a good way. So if you'd like to share, I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, well, when I was 17, nearly 18, I decided I had enough of the rules. And I would leave home like a lot of young Caribbean kids who were born here did. They left home because either there couldn't be two queens or kings in one castle, right? So if you wanted your independence, then you had to move. And I couldn't wait until I was 18 to kind of walk away. But, I didn't maybe do it in the right way. People call the right way because you're supposed to leave, get married and be, do it all in a good way. I chose to do it in the rebellious way. I don't regret it. Some things I regret because my life didn't turn out the way that I'd really planned it would. But I didn't regret taking my freedom when I could, because I think that's how you learn to grow and become an adult. And I think for me, it helped me to see the world in a different way. My view of the world was very limited. I would not have been able to go to parties or experience, what it was like to even drink. I wasn't never, ever a smoker. So that wasn't something that I would entertain, but I definitely had a taste of alcohol. And you wouldn't have had that chance to do that if I'd stayed in that community. And even the clothes that I wore, or, even the opportunity to wear jewelry. We don't wear jewelry in our community. So, yeah, my rebellion allowed me to experience things that weren't allowed, was haram, as the Muslims say, was not acceptable, was not allowed, and definitely would have been something that, you'd have been told, do not, you cannot, and you shouldn't do. I got baptized quite young in the church. I was baptized at about 11 years old. I felt like it was too young for me, but that's what you did in that time. By the time I became a teenager, I was like, what did I do? What was that? Because now I want to have freedoms that I've really stopped myself from having. But the other upside is that as you get older, you realize the great thing about it is that it gives you a moral foundation that you never lose. You actually carry it with you. It's a bit like you've been chipped for life. And so whatever you do, you will never go that far. I would never take drugs. I lived with someone who smoked weed for years and years and years. I never smoked weed. I tried it, but I never got into that behavior because it was just against everything that I'd ever been taught. And even drinking, I couldn't drink. Even now, if someone gives me a glass of wine, it would take me all day to try and drink a glass of wine, and I'd get drunk on one glass of wine. It's because I didn't grow up that way. I mean, I probably had my first drink when I was 30. And it was, I still remember it was Malibu and pineapple something. And I was so high going home. Everybody thought I'd had about 10 drinks. I only had, I think it was 2 drinks, two glasses of Malibu and pineapple. And yeah, because my body wasn't used to alcohol. But, in some ways, it is good that, I had that healthy lifestyle, because now I appreciate it because I've aged well. And I think when you look after your body, that happens. So, there are downsides and there are good sides to the life that I was in. But I definitely appreciate it. It was great teaching and a good foundation.
So you mentioned something about haram. Are you also Muslim as well? Or did you just dabble in Islam?
No, I've got Muslim friends. And so we always laugh about haram. Because they always say, oh, that's haram. You can't do it. It's haram.
Okay.
It's forbidden. So I was just joking when I said that. No, I'm not Muslim. I'm not trying to be either.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious about that. I mean, some cultures are haram. They say haram, or, they say, in the Jewish community, it's not kosher, right? Or, different communities say different things. So I was just curious to add that in there, if that was something that you had experienced Islam, because I had gone through that myself phase of experiencing different things. So I was just curious as to if you had that background, but all good, all good. So one of the other things I wanted to touch on is like, you know, you yourself being a Black woman in Britain, you know, do you think it was more difficult of being compared to other races and things like that? I'm just curious about that. What's your take on that, your background?
Well, I think as a Black woman in Britain, it definitely is harder. It has been hard. I think going into the workplace and realizing that it's easier for your peers to get jobs, to be promoted. Right. We talk about the glass ceiling, not being able to get through the glass ceiling, which is to get into the boardroom or be a director. When I was first working in public sector, I used to talk about the concrete ceiling because I feel it's a concrete ceiling often, you know, to break through. But then, you know, I chaired a staff group for 5 years in a big organization, and it was a bit for Black and ethnic minorities. And I advocated for people in the workplace. And I was someone who'd be called into meetings when people were trying to be disciplined. I'd be the person that someone would come and tell when they were suffering discrimination or in any form, especially if it was on racial terms, and they're afraid to identify it even as such, because again, people try to stop you from raising your voice when things are happening. Right. And so I've experienced all kinds of things. The biggest thing I think at the moment is the subtle racism that goes on, that nobody will come to your face and say, I hate you as a Black person, but what they will do is oppress you in different ways. And, you know, line management is the easiest way to do it. Yeah. So someone's a manager. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. No one can see what they're saying. Right. You can't record them, you know. So someone can be oppressed almost daily by someone, yet the world does not know what's going on. And if you speak up about it, sometimes you can end up losing your employment, or no one wants to touch you in the future because you have taken action against an employer. So, you know, it's a difficult one.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people are suffering in the workplace because although we have equalities, laws and stuff like that, you know, those who are in leadership find ways to circumvent that.
For sure. And do you think that has an impact on, you know, let's say your mental health as an example?
Definitely. Definitely. You have got to be a strong person to survive in the workplace. And I have been working for many years in the public and private sector. And I think if I wasn't the kind of person I am, I would not be working now, or I'd have some mental health issues or, you know, or whatever. But you have to learn the game and how to play the game. And I think what I've learned, I've been able to empower my children who now work in the sector. And they are surviving because I was able to say, look, when they tell me stories about things that are happening, I've been able to say, this is what you need to do. This is how you fight. This is how you challenge people. And they've all gone through it in different ways. But that's the benefit of having gone through it myself. I can now go, look, that definitely is racism and it's subtle. And here's what you need to do. We're there to help each other. And I think if people would help more, assist each other more, instead of everybody keeping quiet when they're going through stuff, we'll deal with more issues hands-on. But we now have a thing where everybody's trying to protect themselves, and it being an economy where now we've got a high inflation, it's a recession and all the rest of it. People are afraid to lose their work, so they keep quiet.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to use that as a perfect segue. You mentioned, you know, your children. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, you know, now that you have children, you know, how does that like affect you? You know, you having a daughter and going through those types of interactions? Like how has that affected the family dynamic?
Oh, it's been good. I mean, you know, I've got one daughter that's practically at director level now. No, it's been good because we can talk about anything that's going on in the workplace, and they feel like they have a supporter, someone who can coach them through stuff. And I can only do that because I have worked long and hard. So yeah, it if anything, it has been very positive for them. Although I think probably they didn't like it when they were young that I was working. But I feel like if I wasn't working, I wouldn't have the experience that I have now to share with them. So they can see the other side now. If they have a working mum, who is going to help them right now with the things that maybe they were going through when they first started working? So, you know, I remember my son working with a woman who he struggled with, and it wasn't a white woman, it was a black woman. And he was like, yeah, he came home and was like, Mom, this is not easy. You know, it's a sister and she's not nice. And I said to him, okay, so my advice is you learn her. Try to learn her, you know, because everybody has their way of being, but learn who she is and then try to understand how to work with her. And it took him probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And they became super friends. He worked with her for another like 2-3 years before she moved on. And then she recommended him for a senior post. So, you know, there are ways and ways of dealing with people. But some of it is about the emotional intelligence that you're going to use to understand how to work with someone who may be difficult. Some of it may be about just addressing bad behavior in a way that protects you, making sure you speak up. And if you can't get a response from one level, taking it up a notch.
Absolutely. Ms. Ebony, this rolls into the last few questions we have for you. But, you know, congratulations, like we spoke about before, on your 6 years doing podcasts based on relationships, and wanted to know, based on that experience and all the stories that you know we spoke about offline, big narrative today in our world, and we actually spoke about it before we started recording, where that a lot of men and women are saying that they don't need to be in relationships. So, you know, just based on your experience doing not just the podcast on relationships for 6 years, but just, you know, your life experience, what would you say to that, and if you give any advice to people that, you know, don't want to be with anybody?
I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want to be with anybody. If you get the subject of relationships on the table, it's the most interesting, most exciting topic, and it's always a hot topic because people really need people. People want to be in relationship, but the world has become very difficult for relationships. What people would like is the romance. They like all the nice bits. But because of trauma and the trauma that we've experienced, which is not just in relationship, but in life generally, it's very difficult when you meet someone who has their own trauma to work out, how are we going to coexist together? How is this going to work? So I don't believe there's anybody who doesn't want it. I feel like it's just like, how can I get it to work the way I would like it to work for me? And that's a big question. How do you work with someone who came from a different family, a different background, who went through different things in their childhood, their adulthood, who've been scarred, scarcity, who's been scarred in so many ways by the experiences they've gone through. And then we come from sometimes 2 different racial backgrounds, or the same, but from different parents with different, morals and principles, and, and different faiths even sometimes, or even the same faith, but different ways of living our faith. And then together we want to try and make something work. It's not easy. So I think we just need to be more honest about our interactions. We're all a mess. And so, stop being afraid of another person's mess. Just work out what it is and hopefully they're honest enough to share with you or you work it out by asking the right questions. And then you decide, can I handle that mess? Is that something I can work with? Is that something that is that someone that I can try and build something with? And then it's as well understanding, is there a purpose for us being together? Sometimes there's no purpose. Sometimes someone just wants a bit of sex. It's like, work it out. Is this for me? Is this not for me? If I'm not that kind of person, I don't want that kind of relationship. How do I make sure I don't get the relationship I didn't want? And sometimes we are settling for things that we don't want, but because we want to be in an interaction or we want intimacy, we put up with stuff that doesn't work for us. And long term, when we're calling heartache, it's our own ache because we're not able to say no to stuff that we don't want. Or we feel like, I've been talking to someone for a couple of months. Oh, this should now mean relationship. No, it doesn't. You've just been talking. No relationship is happening until someone says, actually, I'd like to take this a step further. And so we make up stories, oh, this person said this person said that. That means they're feeling me. It's your story.
No, for sure. And I appreciate that perspective. I'm going to be wrapping up here. And Miss Ebony, we appreciate your time. One of the things I just want to talk about before we, left out is like, in terms of like, I know we've had discussions on this before in terms of, the UK, Britain, and how, let's just say London as an example, how that is compared to New York City a lot. I come from New York City. I'm just curious as to, do you have any insights before we close out on the parallels between the two cities? Just briefly on that, do you have anything that you can share with the audience?
Well, my best friend lives in New York, and she always says New York is very much like the UK. I've never been to New York. I've only been to Miami in the US, and I have been invited several times to New York. So I feel quite bad. I could say more about New York if I'd actually said yes to one of the trips. I just find the US a little bit big and scary for me compared to the UK, sorry. I liked Miami, actually. It was good. But I got a bit freaked out because they were taking pictures of my iris. And I was like, that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. I don't know. Maybe it does. But, I was like, what? Someone's taking pictures of my iris. What is this? And I think that put me off the US. So I'm going to apologize and say I really don't know too much about what happens in New York, but I meet a lot of people here who come from New York in the UK, and they say our experiences and even our weather are very similar. I don't know because I've not been to New York.
I know that New York has about 8 million people in New York City, and London has about 9.5 million. So in terms of population, it's more populated. So that I will definitely say. And, I have friends that live in London. I have a lot of people I talk to. So I have an understanding of how things are there. It's very similar. And just think it's a very interesting dynamic to discuss. But again, I want to thank you for your time. In terms of people reaching out to you, I know you've been doing podcasts and been on other shows. How can the people get in contact with you, Miss Ebony? And what are some methods that they can use to get in contact with you?
Well, you can get hold of me on YouTube. I've got a channel called Hidden Gems Academy. And also, if you go to Facebook, I have a page called Hidden Gems Academy. And on Instagram, it is Ms_Ebony Empress. Ms_Ebony Empress. And anywhere, when you Google online, if you look for Ebony Empress and recording personality, it will be me. I'm also on Clubhouse as Ms. Ebony Empress. So, yeah, you can find me. Okay. I've even joined TikTok recently. So if you go on TikTok, I've got a channel called Hidden Gems Academy on TikTok.
Hidden Gems Academy. And when people go to check out your pages, like on Hidden Gems, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, what can they expect when they get to that site?
So on Instagram, I'm not dancing. There's no dancing on Instagram. But what I do have are some bits of my shows on YouTube. I think I put something up for my birthday as well, that little videos. So I've started putting videos on TikTok, and those videos can also be seen on Instagram. So I'm just trying to build another bit of social media, because people say you should be on TikTok. I'm like, I don't do the dancing, but I can try and do other things. So it's really just trying to showcase a bit of my YouTube channel and for people to see some of the wonderful people I have interviewed on Hidden Gems Academy. Hidden Gems Academy is really about finding those hidden gems, those people who are making a difference in the world and may not be visible. So I'm trying to make the invisible visible through my channel, and I'm going to continue that work. I'm also looking forward to my book next week coming out, which will be on Amazon, and it's called How to Release Your Voice and Speak Powerfully. So yeah, there's lots to find in the next couple of months. I'm going to be putting out some masterclasses as well. So yeah, lots going on.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. All right, so we're going to close out here. We really appreciate your time. And Jacob, do you have any final thoughts?
Miss Ebony, love you. Thank you very much for your time. It's been amazing. And we definitely look forward to having you back here in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that you guys invited me and that we finally got together for this conversation. And I look forward to many more in the future. Good luck with everything that you're doing as well.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate you guys.
And we'll definitely promote your book when we put this out as well. So appreciate you sharing.
Cool. And Scar City, I look forward to meeting you in London when you get here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. This is Scar City from All Emotion and Jacob, and we're signing out. Thank you.
Thank you again, Miss Ebony Empress. And thank you all for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe to our email list on our website so you can receive all of our episodes and all of our content. Just want to take a second. All Emotion was in Colombia for a little bit, and I would just want to say thank you for everybody that's associated with All Emotion. I'm proud to say that we made our first donation to a school in Cartagena, Colombia, to help children have a meal that day. So, that's the goal, is to help others. And this is Jake from All Emotion. Take care and be safe.